Hi everyone, my name is Diana McAlintal.
And I'm Nick Wagner.
And we are Team RCIA. Now I know a lot of us are under a coronavirus kind of shelter in place, not being able to go out, and many of our dioceses and parishes are also, they have suspended the gathering of any of parish groups or liturgies, including Sunday Mass.
And that's probably going to extend through the Triduum in many places, at least here for sure in the Diocese of San Jose. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about what the Rite allows for situations like this, and then some creative adaptations that we can make to celebrate or care for the elect who are preparing for initiation.
So we're going to take a look specifically at the baptismal rites that normally take place at the Easter Vigil, as well as some of the rites during Lent that are there to prepare the elect for initiation. Fortunately, the Church does already provide rituals for such an occasion when we are not in our usual normative operation, which I think we're in right now. We are in this very unusual time. And so within the ritual of the RCIA itself, the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, you'll find right there in the table of contents a section at the beginning, paragraph 26 through 30. So paragraph 26 through 30 talks about what we need to do if we have to celebrate the baptismal rites in a time outside of the norm, which is typically the Easter Vigil.
If you're looking in the table of contents, the title of the section is Outside of Usual Times.
Mm-hmm.
So this is outside of usual times.
And if you're in another country outside of the United States, such as Canada or Australia, the numbers here are the same. So take a look at paragraphs 26 through 30, not page 26 through 30, but paragraphs 26 through 30. So in that section, it'll say that if you need to celebrate baptism outside of the normal time, which is Easter, then you would choose a date, and leading up to that date, you would celebrate the various rites that are necessary to prepare the elect for initiation.
So the first rite for the elect is the rite of election. And I think everywhere in the United States, churches were still open and celebrating Mass on the first Sunday of Lent, and I believe that everybody celebrated the rite of election. But if this kind of lockdown goes on for a significant amount of time, it could be the case that you'd have a catechumen who becomes ready for the celebration of initiation at the later time when we eventually do celebrate initiation. So in that case, you would need to celebrate the rite of election with that catechumen, which you could do. You could get permission from the bishop to celebrate it in the parish, and then make that catechumen an elect for the upcoming rites.
But if you already have elect, those who have already been elected by your local bishop to celebrate initiation at the next Easter Vigil, then you would not celebrate the rite of election again with them.
Right.
That's
They're already elect.
Yes, that's a one and done liturgy for them. But you would celebrate the scrutinies. Now, in some places, some areas were able to celebrate the first scrutiny on the third Sunday of Lent, but not every place was able to do that.
The Rite says in paragraph 20 that if for some reason an elect is going to miss a scrutiny, you need to get a dispensation from the bishop. Now, not all bishops even know that, but it's in paragraph 20 of the Rite. It says there that he can dispense from one scrutiny, or in really serious cases, 2 scrutinies. Mm-hmm. So the Rite seems to presume you're going to be celebrating, no matter what, at least 1 scrutiny. So if you're postponing the rites to a later time of the year, and you've celebrated no scrutiny so far, then you'd want to celebrate at least 1 scrutiny. I would say if you haven't celebrated any of them, to plan to celebrate all 3 of them, spaced appropriately the same way that they would be spaced in Lent. And you, of course, you'd use the readings that are assigned for the scrutinies. Mm-hmm. If you've already celebrated 1 scrutiny, you've already celebrated the first scrutiny, and for whatever pastoral reasons you don't feel like you're able to celebrate any further scrutinies, then with the dispensation of your bishop, you can do that.
And these scrutinies, you would celebrate them. They could be celebrated at a Sunday Mass if you wanted, but they don't have to be. They could be celebrated at a Mass during the week or at a Liturgy of the Word outside of the regular parish Mass schedule. And so don't feel like you have to do these at your usual Sunday Mass. But you do need to do them. So if you have to do the first scrutiny about 3 weeks before you're going to plan to baptize your elect, and then so on and so on for each week, so that it still has that progressive nature. And that could be a good preparation too as well for your parish community, to kind of get back into that feel of the Lenten preparation and prayer, intense prayer for your elect.
Now, if you're going to celebrate the initiation outside the usual times, it's not like we're moving Easter Vigil. Whatever Sunday you land on, and ideally you would celebrate initiation on a Sunday at a Sunday Mass with the worshiping assembly, and whatever Sunday you land on, that would probably be the set of readings that you would use. Now, if you land on a Sunday in ordinary time, you have the option of substituting the readings from the ritual Mass for Christian initiation. But if you land on a feast day or a solemnity, those readings cannot be changed, but you'd use the ones that are assigned for the day. And I'd probably use the ones that are assigned for the Sunday anyway, and not substitute the readings for Christian initiation.
And so you're not pretending it's Easter Vigil.
Right. You want to celebrate the Sunday that you're on.
And you'll find that directive in paragraph 27 in the Rite, where it says, as far as possible, the sacraments of initiation are to be celebrated on a Sunday, using, as occasion suggests, the Sunday Mass or one of the ritual Masses, Christian initiation, baptism.
So now how do you decide which Sunday to move initiation to? Well, first of all, you really can't decide that if you're going to follow strictly what the Rite says. That's up to your bishop to decide what day or what season you're going to move initiation to if you're celebrating outside of the normal Triduum. But assuming you're in at least some kind of dialogue communication with your bishop, and perhaps the bishop is delegated to each parish to let them decide what's best for the parish, that might be something that happens. The way that you would decide is to look at the readings for the coming Sundays and determine what readings have a baptismal character. Now, there's a professor at Notre Dame, a liturgy professor named Max Johnson, and he wrote this tome of a book called Rite of Christian Initiation, Their Evolution and Interpretation. And so in this book, Max has identified several Sundays that he believes have a baptismal character, kind of a baptismal feel, a baptismal season. And I don't think he identified this one, but we've heard of some places that are sort of already planning to perhaps move the initiation rites to Pentecost. That may not be possible in some places. I don't think it's going to be possible here in the Diocese of San Jose. But if it becomes possible in your place, Pentecost would be an excellent time to do the initiation rites. You could even think about doing them on the Vigil of Pentecost, so you'll get that darkness to light sort of feel that's celebrating in the night that Easter Vigil has. The next Sunday that Max identifies that has a baptismal character, which makes sense when you think about it, is Trinity Sunday. So on that feast, we celebrate the three persons in one God, the dynamic relationship of the Trinity, and that's in fact what the elect will be baptized into. So Trinity Sunday could be an excellent time to celebrate the initiation rites. If we need to go even later into the year, another time that Max identifies is the Feast of the Assumption in August. And I think that has a real interesting feel to it, because Mary is assumed into heaven, is assumed in the fullness of the divine life, is assumed into everything that we're baptizing the elect into. And it has the added benefit of you really get to emphasize the Marian aspect of our Catholic faith, which you don't get as strongly in the Triduum. So I think that could be interesting to identify the Assumption as the time for initiation. Another time in the fall to look at, according to Max, is the Feast of All Saints, which again makes a lot of sense because we're baptizing the elect into the circle of saints. We sing the Litany of Saints in the baptismal ritual, so that's another excellent time. I don't think any of us will probably have to go this late, but just so we have it as a possibility, know that the Feast of the Immaculate Conception is another time you could look at. Again, because the whole imagery of Christ becoming flesh and becoming one with us, becoming incarnate, that's again, the elect are baptized into the body of Christ. And again, you get that possibility of a Marian emphasis on that day, which would just be excellent.
And the grace that is given to Mary even before her birth, that is what the promise of baptism is. That sense that God has chosen us even before we were born to know the fullness of grace in the reign of God, the promise of glorification in Christ. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we are marking in the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception.
And then Max talks really about the whole Christmas season, the season of incarnation, the same way we were talking about with the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, that idea of incarnation, that the whole Christmas season could be thought of as sort of having a baptismal character. And he identifies particularly the Feast of the Presentation of the Lord, which we don't always remember is kind of part of the Christmas season. I think it might be officially outside the season, but it is a Christmas feast. And it's also Candlemas, so you get that light-darkness thing again. You could light lots and lots of candles as part of the ritual. Oddly, he does not identify baptism of the Lord, which seems like a no-brainer to me.
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah.
And you asked me this, and I don't remember if he identifies the Epiphany or not, but Epiphany, or the whole Christmas season, but Epiphany, baptism of the Lord, presentation of the Lord, all of those would be excellent times to celebrate initiation.
And the Eastern churches actually do celebrate baptisms at Epiphany, at the Theophany.
Yeah.
And so that could be another time that we look at. And the reason we're going through these various solemnities and feasts and times of year outside of the Triduum is to really get at what Max Johnson says, that the entire liturgical year has baptismal imagery that we don't always highlight because we're so focused in the Triduum on the death and resurrection of Christ, which is absolutely key. But in our historical tradition, there are so many other images of new birth, of glorification, of divinization, of the sense of harvest and the promise that is given to all of God's children. And so those are absolutely other ways that we can focus on baptism in different times of the liturgical year. And these are opportunities for us to celebrate the initiation of adults.
Now, if none of those work for you for whatever reason, then go through the lectionary and look for readings, Sundays that have readings that have to do with commitment, discipleship, vocation, conversion, mission, following, any of those kinds of themes that we get out of baptism. Try to find readings that really kind of fit together with this idea, because like Diana said, the year is so rich with baptismal imagery.
Yeah. So now if you're a bishop watching this video, thank you for watching this video. Or if you happen to send this video along to your bishop, one of the things that the local ordinary might do to help parishes make this adaptation during this very unusual time is to look at paragraph 34 in the RCIA text. That lists all of the things that a bishop is in charge of in terms of Christian initiation, and especially paragraph 34.2 that says the bishop for his own diocese decides whether and when, as circumstances warrant, the entire rite of Christian initiation may be celebrated outside the usual times. And so your bishops can be a great help, and the staff of your bishop's office can be a great help for parishes to sort of discern and decide when would be a good time for the local diocese to celebrate initiation of adults, because we weren't able to celebrate them in Triduum this year.
One final thing we want to mention while we're in this section is the baptism of catechumens who are in danger of death. And that is, you want to look at it in your table of contents. It's in part 2. It says Christian initiation of a person in danger of death. And we would apply, it's obvious who we'd apply that to. A person would not have to be an elect to celebrate that rite. If we celebrate that rite, it's very compressed and it's sort of for an emergency situation. And if we do celebrate that rite and our prayers work and the person recovers, then we would go back and celebrate all the rites that we had not celebrated. So if it is a catechumen, for example, who's just beginning their journey and they recover, now they're a fully baptized person, so we have to treat them with the dignity of their baptism, but they still need formation as though they were a catechumen. So we do all of the formation with them, celebrate all the rites of the catechumenate, we'd celebrate rite of election with them and the scrutinies before they're already initiated. We celebrate the rite of election and the scrutinies with them to sort of go back and give them the formation that they missed.
And if, God forbid, one of your current elects gets sick with the coronavirus or any other disease that puts their health at critical danger, then you would want to consider celebrating those rites of initiation for a person in danger of death. You wouldn't go through all of the kinds of things we've just talked about setting up a special time. Just go ahead and do what is best for that particular person.
So what would you do if you're in a place, I don't think there's any place like this in the U.S., but there might be in other countries where we will have the Triduum liturgies, but the health officials have asked us to keep the numbers at a minimum. So what kinds of adaptations can we make for the Triduum, especially the Easter Vigil in that situation?
So imagining an Easter Vigil that might have, 25 people, maybe just the ministers and those elect and their godparents and family present. What kinds of things might you do? Obviously, you'd have to pay attention to what your local health officials and your county officials have said in terms of being safe, looking at how you deal with the holy water. If you're doing baptism by immersion, that could be difficult if you have multiple people to baptize, to make sure that the water is kept safe. So you might consider instead just effusion. I think that's what it's called. Where
pouring
water over the head, and it's not like the.
It's not dribbling water over the forehead. It's pouring water over the head.
So yes. taking a big container and really dunking the person over the head with water. That could alleviate some of the concerns about health issues with the water and using the same water for each person. Obviously, their touch will need to be included, especially in terms of the confirmation and laying on of hands, and so your presiders would need to take precautions for that.
If you have a lot of elect, you could baptize just a few of them at the Easter Vigil and then kind of spread the rest of them out through the Sundays of Easter and do the baptisms that way.
So we don't have any real specific answers for how you would need to adapt your Triduum celebrations in those kinds of cases. I do know that there is at least one diocese that is planning to live stream its celebration and allow only the elect and their godparents and family into that space itself. And I think that is an option, but it wouldn't be my first option, only because having the presence of the assembly is so important. And really, having the assembly watching from behind the screen is not the same as having them bodily present, surrounding our elect in prayer as they are baptized.
Yeah, I think it's a tough call because the symbols and the images and the power of the Easter Vigil that we've all come to love is important. But as Diana said, it's also important to have that fullness, that sense of the community there, welcoming the elect into the fullness of our faith. So it's we don't have like you should do it this way or that way, but it is something to consider. Don't automatically default to the Easter Vigil if you can only have a small group there.
And the baptismal rites benefit the faithful as well, not just the elect. And so having them fully participate in those baptismal rituals, the sacraments of initiation, at a later time may be a greater benefit than trying to live stream baptisms that aren't as full in their participation at the Triduum.
One thing to do for sure, and the rites already tell us this, and it just we have not fully implemented it, but the time of initiation, the Easter Vigil, or if we're going to move initiation to another time, that time is really for the unbaptized. And so the baptized candidates should definitely be moved to other Sundays outside of the Triduum. And if it's possible to do it in the Easter season, be great, but they could also easily be moved to sometime in ordinary time. So anyone who's a baptized Protestant being received into full communion, or a baptized Catholic completing their initiation, or especially those baptized Catholics who are already fully initiated but just missed confirmation somewhere along the way. Those folks should not celebrate their sacraments at the Easter Vigil.
One thing I would maybe recommend is that for those who are baptized Christians who are being received into the full communion of the Catholic Church, I might even discern if it would be possible to celebrate that reception with them now, before the Triduum, either at one of your televised Sunday masses, where it would just be the ministers and the candidate for reception and their godparent and family. And because the reception rite itself is so simple, it's the profession of faith, the statement of faith made by the candidate, and then confirmation. And so it could be done pretty easily, and we don't want to add any more burden and obstacles to our sisters and brothers who want to become part of the Catholic communion.
Now, it could be the case, I don't think this would be too many of the elect, but I can imagine one or two of the elect might want to wait until the next Triduum to celebrate their initiation, so they get that fullness of the assembly together and all the rituals of the Triduum and all of that. And so that is an option. So I don't know that I would suggest that or push that or try to convince any of the elect to do that. But if they come to us and ask if that's a possibility, then yes, that we could certainly let them wait until the next Triduum. And they could participate fully in Catholic life, except for coming to communion on Sunday. So they could participate in the evangelizing mission of the church, caring for the sick and the poor, learning more and more about how to celebrate their Catholicism in the domestic church, and so on.
Because remember, the catechumens are, as soon as they become catechumens, are members of the household of God. They're not like pretend Catholics. They are Catholics, simply waiting to be baptized into the death and resurrection of Christ. And so again, it's an option for these catechumens, your elect, to wait until next Easter Vigil, but it's probably not going to be a much used option.
Now, this final point came up as we were kind of talking about putting this video together, and we saw some suggestions on social media about actually moving Easter to a different date. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, why do we focus so much on the Triduum as the heart of when we baptize adults into Christ? And because really it is, the Triduum is the fullest celebration of the Paschal mystery. That's why baptism is connected to it. And so there are so many things that go into the scheduling of when Easter is. There isn't like a hotline to the Pope to say, hey Pope, when's the Easter Vigil?
And we should note before we say any of this, no parish is permitted to move Easter, and no diocese, in fact, is permitted to move Easter. The only one who can move the date of Easter is the Pope. So it would have to come from the Pope. But we thought we'd talk anyway about if the Pope asked us, and he calls people kind of randomly, we would suggest not moving the date of Easter. And so why don't you talk about what kind of the first point about that is?
Because the Easter, the way the calendar is set around Easter is not because of our convenience, not because it comes around spring break or what, but because of the alignment of the stars, literally. The Easter Sunday is scheduled as the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox in spring, if you're in the northern hemisphere, or the fall equinox in the southern hemisphere. Either case, it's in the early part of the year, the first part of the year.
You don't have to remember all that. Just remember the beginning of spring, or if you're in the southern, you're right. If you're in the southern hemisphere, the beginning of fall. It's about that turning of the season that's so important. So for those of us in the north, the turning of the season from death to life, from winter to new life. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, that moment when we harvest all of life, where we reap the fruits of all the life that has been just blooming all around us. And for since most of us are no longer in agricultural communities, we've lost the sense of how important that is. But for our ancestors, that was literally life and death, moving in those seasons correctly, and knowing when those moments were in their lives, and aligning the resurrection with those seasonal moments is a key part of what we grew up with spiritually over the centuries of the church.
And so honoring the cosmic nature of Easter is a great statement of our submission to God, who created the cosmos. Right. We cannot control when the sun will rise and when the moon will rise and when the sun will set. We cannot control when daylight and nighttime are equal. We can't control that. And so by letting ourselves enter into that cosmic praise of God, where the stars and the planets give praise with all of humankind to our Creator, that is a way of confessing that God is God and we are not. And that is why we enter into this Paschal mystery, this dying to ourselves, so that we can rise to this way of life that is in harmony with all creation.
And that the church teaches that cosmic rhythm of the calendar is a revelation of Christ. It's one of the sources of revelation. And so especially for the elect who are teaching to recognize Christ in all the signs around them, we don't want to start monkeying around with the calendar, because the calendar is, in a sense, sacred and is revelatory.
And I know that it could be easy for the Pope to say, we're going to move Triduum to August or to September or to some other time, and the intention is great and good, but it also has its liabilities and its drawbacks.
Yeah, one drawback is an ecumenical concern, because it's not likely that all our Protestant brothers and sisters would also move Triduum, or if they did, not necessarily to the same time. And also the Orthodox Church, they don't celebrate at the same week, but they still calculate that rhythm of spring, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, fall, the movement of the sun and the stars for the equinox, the moon, sun, and the stars for the equinox. So all of that is that ecumenical concern is very important to take into account as well, because our unity is so stressed as it is. We don't want to do one more thing to stress Christian unity.
Yeah. So I think realizing that we will not be able to celebrate the Triduum in our usual way is certainly a sadness and a loss. And we have to grieve that. We have to grieve that this entire liturgical calendar, at least since the beginning of 2020, has been disrupted in a way that we're never going to get back the lost time that has passed already. And I think the invitation for us is to enter into that grieving and to also look at the time that we are in. How is the Paschal mystery being manifested right now? Even if it's not Triduum, how is God's resurrection being promised to us right now in this very moment? And I think that is a grace for us as well. But yes, it is a sadness that we cannot gather together. And so some things that we can do.
Well, we know our faith tells us every time there's a loss, every time there's a death, that's a doorway, an entryway, a liminal time into resurrection. So part of the light of this, part of the resurrection that we can find in this is an opportunity for us to really emphasize the domestic church. So the Triduum is not lost to the domestic church. The season of Lent and Easter is not lost to the domestic church, and we can find ways to mark the seasons in the domestic church and mark time in a sacred way in our household communities.
Yeah, because remember, your home, whether you live alone or in a community with family or with loved ones, that is the first place where we learn and hand on our Christian faith. That is the first church for all of us. The parish church is certainly necessary and where we are nourished in our faith. But if our faith isn't lived in the domestic church, then it's not really lived out in the world. It becomes something we do at the parish. And remember, the church is not the building. The church is the living stones of God who have been baptized into the Christian family.
So to celebrate the Triduum in the domestic church, for example, you might have a washing of the feet on Holy Thursday before you have dinner. Everyone in the family wash each other's feet. For Good Friday, I would guess every Catholic household has a cross that you can venerate and pray, and pray especially intercessions for those most in need during this time. And then for Easter Saturday, for Holy Saturday night, plan a big family banquet, light lots of candles, have water around where we can bless each other, and celebrate a sacramental Eucharist, small s, small e, family church meal that really is a Christian meal that is the image of Christ.
And if you have any memories or mementos from your baptism, pull those out. If you have your baptismal certificate, your candle.
Tell stories.
Yes, and then personally renew your own baptismal promises. I think that would be a wonderful way, in addition to all of the other domestic ways that we celebrate Easter with Easter eggs and joy. We can do that. We'll still have to adapt to all of the health needs that are in place at that time, but as Nick said, Easter's not lost on us if we celebrate them in our own homes.
Yep.
And so I think hopefully some of this has helped you and your parish teams think of what does the church already offer us to help us in these unusual times, but also to think creatively of how we can not only form our elect, but all of our parishioners and faithful in our communities to look at what is the grace that is being offered to us in this very unique time of history.
Yeah, it's a tough time, but we have hope, right? That's the foundation of our faith. We have hope, and we're going to get through this. Our elect are going to get through this, and somehow we'll be able to use this experience to grow more deeply in our faith.
Yeah. So if you have any questions or any suggestions to enhance this dialogue, please send them to us, and we'd love to share them with the rest of the Team RCIA community. You can send your comments to us at nick@teamrcia.com
or diana@teamrcia.com.
And please share this video with any of your colleagues and coworkers who are trying to help all of us mark the Paschal season with grace and also some grief, but always hope in the resurrection.
All right, everyone, stay safe. We're praying for you. God bless.
Pray for us. And we're praying for your elect and all of their godparents and family and friends, okay? Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.